Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. We are so excited to have our guest speaker, Jenna Dykeman from USU Extension. Jenna is a fabulous resource to us here at the county. She is a Utah State University Extension Assistant Professor based in Cache County. She's a registered dietitian, and she's also graduated with her master's in nutrition and dietetics from the University of Idaho. She has become a dietitian because she loves helping others and teach them how to achieve optimal health by making healthy and sustainable food and lifestyle choices. Her go-to mantra with food is all foods fit. In her position with USU Extension, she loves working with community members across Cache County and now over to Salt Lake County. We are so excited to have you here today. I'm going to turn the time over to you to talk about eating seasonally.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sadie. Yes, I am very excited to be here. I've worked with some of your coworkers in other classes, and so it's nice to be presenting to people in Salt Lake County as well. So yes, let me share my screen. All right. And then I'll present that. Okay. Well, let's see. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So just a introduction a little bit more. As Sadie said, I'm located in Cache County up in northern Utah, but very close to Salt Lake County. I really enjoy summer. It's my favorite season, even though it's been super hot this summer. Enjoy cooking, running, and even gardening. And I am a dietitian. I've worked for USU Extension for about almost 4 years now. It's a really great place to work. And if you're not familiar with Extension, I figure I just give a brief overview of what USU Extension does. When you think of Utah State University, most people think of Logan, the campus up here, which is true. We have a great campus up here. Maybe some of you went to Utah State, but we also have the extension program. And with extension, it's kind of what we do is we are an extension of the university. So for me, rather than working on campus with students, I am located in the community, and I teach community classes and run programs that benefit individuals, families throughout the county. And you can see the map kind of on that picture. We have county offices all throughout the state of Utah. We're in almost every county. Some of those pretty rural counties are, we have one that's shared. So, but we have a lot of great resources. And one key thing with USU Extension is we are a research-based program. We're associated with the university. So all of our programs and resources are up to date. They're research-based, they're evidence-based. And so you can know when you're attending our classes or taking advantage of our resources, we're really doing our best to provide really reliable resources. And you can see there's a lot of great program areas. So for me, I work a lot in food and nutrition, health and wellness, but we have a lot of great experts in agriculture, natural resources, business, finance, relationships. We even have the 4-H program is within Extension. So some of you might be more familiar with 4-H. But anyway, that's just kind of a brief overview. Whenever I talk with different groups, I always like to give a little explanation of what Extension is. Some people know it and some people don't. So for you in Salt Lake, there's a great Salt Lake County office. and there's some really great people working in that office. So if you're interested in learning more or taking classes, you can just search USU Extension Salt Lake County and find their website and look up some programs. So, okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. So on to the main topic why I'm talking today. So Sadie asked me to talk about eating seasonally. And I feel like there's a lot to this topic, but I narrowed it down to 4 different areas, and we'll just kind of go through that. I don't know how to see comments on WebEx. Let's see.
I
So,
can read them out loud too.
okay,
That's
yeah, so if there's like specific questions as I'm going through this, feel free to, you can unmute yourself and ask a question, or Sadie, if you want to interrupt me and ask the question, that works great too. So either way. So I wanted to start off talking a little bit about why it's important to eat seasonally. When we're talking about eating seasonally, a lot of times we're focused on the produce of things. And so I wanted to share some stats about eating veggies and how Americans do with that in general, and then focus on how we can eat seasonally throughout the year, the importance of variety in food, and then just finishing up with talking about reducing food waste, because as we know, produce doesn't last forever. And so I think food waste is a major part of thing that we need to prevent when we're trying to eat seasonally and eat more produce. So planning really comes into play when we're trying to do this. So okay, so just some stats. Like I said, I'm a dietitian, so I always like to learn about people's eating habits, and my goal in my work is to help people eat, um, have a better eating pattern and just better lifestyle habits. So it's interesting to see how people are doing in the world today. So this is from the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, just kind of the report they put out every 5 years. But in there, they break up age groups, and they kind of score the eating patterns based on the surveys that they do. And so for adults, ages 18 and older, the healthy eating index score that is the average for that age group is about 57 out of 100. So, you know, it's a little bit more than 50%. And how they measure that is they look at the daily recommendation for the different food groups and see how well people are meeting those recommendations. So looking at this next statistics, about 2 out of 5 food groups that American adults, there's about 2 out of 5 of the food groups that adults meet that recommendation. And maybe you can think for a second and look at this graphic and see which ones they might actually meet. But the 2 that most adults meet are the grains. They were really great about carbohydrates. I don't know about you, but I love carbohydrates. So it's easy to meet that recommendation. And then protein is the other one. The thing that comes into play though is within the grains, we're not so great at our whole grains. And so that's just something interesting to look at. So we're kind of lacking on our fruits and vegetable and our dairy intake. And then another stat I just found, I just threw this on here, is there was a study done 2 years ago, and they found that out of the people that they surveyed, about 75% of Americans have not heard of My Plate. So My Plate is the new and improved food pyramid, was released 12-ish years ago, maybe a little bit longer. So if you haven't heard of it, here we go. Here's that graphic. But it's just kind of a way to show you how to plan your plate. You want to make sure that you're getting about at least a serving from all the food groups in your meals. Okay, so enough about the stats. Oh, well, I spoke too soon. So, just a little bit more. So we talked about the food group side of things. There are some nutrients of concern. So added sugar, saturated fat, and sodium. We've seen that if you eat in excess can increase our risk for chronic disease. And so, again, this is the percentages of adults in America, kind of that average of 18 and older. So for added sugar, most adults, or 61% of adults, are exceeding that recommendation for added sugar. Saturated fat, there's about 72% of us are exceeding that recommendation, and then sodium, about 90% are getting more than that daily recommendation. So how does this connect to eating seasonally? Added sugar, saturated fat, sodium are found more in processed foods and animal products. And so if we're trying to eat more fruits and veggies and eating seasonally, incorporating it into our eating, that can reduce how much of the added sugar and saturated fat and sodium that we're getting, which is a benefit. Obviously, we don't need to cut out. There's benefits to, or not benefits, but there's, what's the word? Our body uses saturated fat and sodium and sugar in our body. There's important roles that it has, but if we're eating in excess, that's where the risk for chronic disease starts to increase. So trying to eat more seasonally can help reduce this number. So, all right. So as we know, there are a lot of great benefits for having a healthy eating pattern. It helps with a lot of different parts of our body, just helps us overall feel better. And so it's really important to strive to have a healthy eating pattern. Of course, life is busy. We can't always have a perfect eating pattern, and that's okay. There can be barriers to eating healthy. So if you want to, you can throw this into the chat. I think I've figured out how to see the chat now. So if you want to say maybe a barrier that you or someone else has faced with healthy eating, I know there's quite a few. I know one in particular is just time in general. Oh yes, Deborah, we're thinking the same thing. The time, not having enough time. Cami, yeah, prep work, definitely. Chopping up vegetables takes a lot more time than you think. Yeah, that's another one. So the increase of food costs, especially, is a major one. So expense, knowing what to substitute. So maybe if you don't have a background in cooking, that can, if you don't have the exact ingredients, not knowing what to substitute, not wanting to go back to the store to get one or two ingredients. Yeah, medication, if you don't have that appetite, you don't want to eat. That's hard as well. And then, yeah, limited knowledge, that's for sure. So maybe kind of going back to, the sodium or saturated fat. Well, if you don't know where that comes from, that could be hard to reduce how much you're eating. So great answers. I like that. Okay, so how can eating seasonally help with all this? So just to define seasonal food, so it's food that is purchased and consumed close to harvest. So that could be going to your local farmer's market. I know up here we have some food stands throughout the week that are open. I have family down in different parts of Utah in the Salt Lake and St. George area, and they always talk about um, having those food stands or a lot of different farmers markets. So that's a really great way to not only eat seasonally, but support your local farmers. Because, we all know that in the store, the food usually comes from further away. And so when we're buying seasonal food, it's usually fresher, it tastes better, and it's actually more nutritious. So when you, from the point of harvesting food to eating it, the nutrients in the food starts to decrease. And so if you can get it from your garden or get it from a local farmer, it can have more nutrients in it. And I always like to think about a tomato you get in like December from the grocery store versus a fresh tomato from your garden or from a farmer's market. It's just it has so much more flavor. It's juicy. It feels like an actual tomato, whereas some of the tomatoes you get in the store do not really taste like tomatoes. So, so one thing to help with eating seasonally is this guide. It's from the USDA, and this is a really awesome resource, and maybe I'll put it into the chat, but you can also just Google USDA seasonal produce guide, and you can find it as well. But they break it down by season, and they show you which foods, fruits, and vegetables are in season, for example, during spring or summer or fall or winter. And so you can use this either while you're shopping in the grocery store or going to your local farmer's market. That's a little bit easier because, they're growing what's in season. But this can be really handy for the grocery store. And one thing that was brought up about a barrier for eating a little bit healthier or buying more produce is the expense of it. And if you're able to buy food in season, if you notice, it tends to be less expensive when you're buying it in season. So if you're buying asparagus in April versus buying it in December, they're less expensive during the springtime. Or an example of another one, like strawberries. They are in season also in the spring. So if you're trying to buy those in the winter as well, they're going to be a little bit more expensive. So using this can help you reduce your food costs. Another thing is if you click on this, we'll click on corn. It gives you a little bit more information about the food. They have recipes that you can try out. One of the barriers was not having limited knowledge, so maybe cooking knowledge or things like that. So looking at different recipes can help you kind of be more confident. Then they have just things that you can learn more. I mean, most people are familiar with corn, but there might be some other fruits or vegetables that you're not super familiar with. And you can use these resources to help you learn more about the vegetable or the fruit. And then lastly, they have information about the nutrient, or I'm sorry, about the produce itself. So so they have all seasons that you can look at the different foods. So I would highly recommend this resource for sure.
Jenna,
Okay.
we're still seeing the
Yes.
slide, so it didn't pop up the seasonal produce
Oh,
guide,
it didn't.
unfortunately.
Oh, okay, here. I will just, sorry about that. I usually present on Zoom and I just share my screen, okay. Let's see. Okay, so I won't say everything I just said, but this is what it looks like. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, and then you can see this season, and then you can see the food in the season. And then if you click on one of them, then it brings up the information from the different things.
I'll also put a link to it in the chat for everybody.
Thanks, Sadie. Okay. All right, we'll go back to the slides. Okay. All right. And then lastly, so eating seasonally is really important, but we're from Utah, and so we don't have farmers markets in the winter, unfortunately. Whereas if we lived in a warmer climate, we might have access to fresh or to farmers markets all throughout the year, which would be really amazing. But you kind of have to adapt, and because of that, you probably have to shop more at the grocery store during the winter months. So one thing with that is to take advantage of different ways that fruits and veggies are offered in the grocery store to help with cutting down on food costs. So that can be, of course, buying fresh food. So if we're looking at the winter months, there are some really great produce items that are in season in the winter months, and they'll be lower in cost. But sometimes you can really make the most of buying frozen foods or frozen like fruits and vegetables, or canned fruits and vegetables, or even dried fruits and vegetables. Well, most people, anyway, so fresh, frozen, canned, or dried. And sometimes canned food tends to get a little bit of bad rap. But just being aware of what to look for when you're buying canned food, it actually can be just as nutritious because they're preserving that food when they're putting it into the can. But what they add into the can make it less nutritious. So we know that canned veggies might be higher in sodium. And so looking for a low sodium option to decrease how much you're getting can help with that. Or rinsing off those veggies when you dump them out of the can, that can get some of that sodium off the can as well. With canned fruit, they have different ways that they package the canned fruit. So it might be in heavy syrup, light syrup, or it might be canned in just fruit juice. And so to reduce the amount of sugar added into that canned fruit, you can get the fruit that's canned just in the juice, and that can help reduce some of that excess sugar. Frozen fruits and veggies are really great as well. So frozen veggies where you can just steam them or throw them into soups, put them into a casserole. They can be a great way to have those fresher foods. When you're looking for the veggies, sometimes they come with like the sauce on there, and just buying the plain veggies can help reduce that excess sodium in them. And then same with the frozen fruit. Getting those, they might be a little less expensive than trying to buy fruit that's out of season. Sometimes they add extra sugar in there, so just looking at the packaging and avoiding that as well. So while we think of eating seasonally as purchasing fresh food from the farmer's market, and that's often what we try to do, we can eat seasonally in those winter months by making the most of those frozen and canned foods. And that'll tie into our ability to reduce food waste as well. Because as we know, canned and frozen produce can last longer than our fresh produce. Okay. All right, and then I just thought I'd throw this in here. It's a little bit out of the way, but it's something that I just kind of thought about as I was preparing this presentation. But So when we think of eating seasonally, as I just mentioned, we think about, we're eating that fresh food, but we go through seasons throughout our life. And so we have to be aware of how our eating patterns might change a little bit um, throughout those different seasons, and not feeling guilty about eating a little bit differently during those times. I think our end goal should be to have a healthy eating pattern. But we, like I said earlier, it might not always be perfect. We have time commitments if we're busy working professionals, or busy raising a young family, or things like that. And just finding ways to adapt in those different seasons, and making the most of it can be beneficial as well. So, okay. All right. So, when we're trying to eat seasonally, eating different fruits and veggies during those spring and summer months, it's important that we also try to have a variety of foods as well. So one great benefit of eating a variety of foods, not only throughout the season, but throughout the week and even throughout your day, you're eating a lot of different nutrients. And one key thing with that is trying to eat more nutrient dense foods. So if you haven't heard of the term nutrient density or nutrient dense foods, all it's saying is that the foods are often higher in nutrients compared to the amount of calories in that food. So a lot of great examples of that are vegetables, fruits, whole grains, nuts and seeds, lean protein, low fat dairy, and beans. And different nutrients can be higher in different foods. So I just listed a few different foods. So when we think of oranges, what vitamin do we think of?
Vitamin C.
Yes, perfect. And then carrots, what vitamin do we think of? Helps our eyes.
Vitamin A.
Yeah,
Vitamin A.
perfect. Vitamin A. And then bananas, any guesses for bananas?
Potassium.
Potassium.
Yeah, perfect. I always think of the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids scene where they're like, potassium, bananas. Anyway, so of course they have other nutrients in these fruits, but that's kind of what we think of with these foods. And so if we're eating a variety of foods, we're getting different nutrients throughout the day and throughout the week. And one great way to do that is to eat or build your plate with color. And this graphic is from the American Heart Association. I just like kind of the color wheel that they've made with the different fruits and veggies. But you can see that there's a lot of different options for the different colors, and you'll be getting different nutrients as you're eating the different foods. I don't know about you, but maybe you've made a plate and you look at it and you're like, okay, everything is brown on this plate. I've done that before. Or you have a lot of red. Maybe you're eating watermelon and tomatoes and I don't know what else. But so sometimes that just happens, and it's no big deal. But trying to plan your meals with color can help you get the vitamins and minerals and the other nutrients that you need to meet those daily recommendations and to help maintain good health throughout your life. And going back to that first slide about with the My Plate, so trying to have all the different food groups can help you eat more color as well. And then just some other benefits of having a variety of foods, eating seasonally throughout the year. It can help with healthy aging. And so, we don't tend to think about aging and what it what it can do when we're younger. But that's some of the key moments in our life where we want to make sure we're building and having healthy habits so we can set up our bodies, I guess, for healthy aging. So having a healthy plate, we talked about that, eating color, having the fruits or having all the different food groups, making sure that we eat those key nutrients. And so eating seasonally, having those different fruits and veggies throughout the different seasons can help with us meeting those recommendations. Hydration doesn't quite apply, but to eating seasonally, but it's a very important thing, making sure that we're getting enough fluids throughout the day, and then eating good portion sizes can help with that too. And we know that if we are able to maintain that healthy diet, we can have a reduced risk for chronic disease. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to prevent everything, but it can reduce that risk, help maintain that muscle mass and that bone health, which is really important to maintaining good health and help with good aging throughout our life. And of course, nutrition is always evolving. We're always discovering new things. And so we can only do the best we can. And as they discover new things, we can implement that. But variety can really help us set us up for success. So just some tips for eating a variety of foods throughout the year. So of course, eating seasonally is very important. Making half your grains whole grains, just throwing that in there. We talked about the fresh, frozen, and canned foods, how that can help with getting not only a variety of foods, but helping with keeping a good food budget, especially with those rising food costs. We talked about food groups. Cooking at home, I think, is important. Helps us be able to choose what we're putting into our foods. So maybe you have a recipe that, let's say you love to make chicken enchiladas, or when you go out to eat, you love chicken enchiladas. And really it's just the tortilla, the chicken, and the enchilada sauce. But if you're at home, you can make chicken enchiladas still, but you could throw in some onions, some peppers, maybe some mushrooms, other produce from your garden. So you're reducing your protein a little bit, but you're adding in more veggies. And that's really helping you increase those veggies, but you're still eating the foods you like to eat. When you're meal planning, you can switch up the different fruits and vegetables that you buy. I know I have some fruits and veggies that I just always love to buy, but maybe saying, oh, this week I'll buy some pears. If it's December, I know in the winter pears are a little bit more in season. So just kind of using that seasonal produce guide that we looked at earlier, and to help you kind of switch up your vegetables. It could be during the week, it could be during the month, or even during that season. Trying new recipes can help with eating a variety of foods. And then brainstorming how to include add-ons into your regular recipes. So I mentioned the chicken enchiladas, trying to add in more veggies. You could even throw in some like black beans with that. So again, eating the foods you still like to eat, but trying to add a little bit more nutrient dense foods into that. And I just like this quote. So it says, I don't think I'll ever grow old and say, what was I thinking eating all of those fruits and vegetables? So going back to the eating seasonally and how much more flavor they have, I think they just really add to the plate and to the flavor of the food that you're eating. And so just really savoring that food as well in the seasons, for Utah through kind of May through September-ish. can help us, get excited for those months that come when we can get those really fresh foods. Okay, so I just want to finish up with reducing food waste. Food waste at home is one of those major contributors to food waste in the country. So finding ways that we can reduce that food waste can be really helpful. So I just want to throw in a few tips about how we can do that at home, and then talk about how we can do it during the season of gardening and going to the farmer's market. So first, just kind of shopping your fridge and your pantry. Most of the time, pantry items last longer, but I don't know about you. If you clean out your pantry every so often and it's 2024 and you're like, oh, this is from 2016. Okay. I have not used this in a while. So rotating your fridge and your pantry before going grocery shopping, so you're not buying new food and then that food that's already at your house is going bad, or it's getting close to that expiration date. And this can help too with cutting down on food costs as well. Not buying more that you can use. If you are trying to implement new eating habits or trying to eat a little bit more fruits and veggies, sometimes we can get overexcited and say, okay, I'm going to buy all of these different fresh fruits and veggies. And by the end of the week, we've gotten through half of them and they start to get bad. And so that could be a waste of money, but also wasting that food. So rather than just buying all fresh foods, again, trying to use canned and frozen foods can help with that. And then planning meals around leftovers. I think that's a major way that we can reduce food waste. So instead of trying to cook 5 meals during the week, maybe cooking 1 or 2 meals, and then finding ways to use that maybe leftover rice in a different recipe, or if you bought a rotisserie chicken, using it in 2 different recipes or something like that. But planning your weekly shopping, so you're having maybe a day of leftovers and a day of revamping that extra food into a new meal. And then if you do have any excess food after a couple of days, you could freeze it and use it later for a quick meal. And then the first in, first out, kind of rotating your food. This can apply in your fridge or your pantry. So putting the new food towards the back, so you're using the older food first. And then this was a recommendation from I'm blanking on the full name, but it's the EPA organization. They mentioned, so using those fruit and veggie drawers in your refrigerator. So veggies that will easily, like leafy greens, broccoli, things like that, they like the high humidity drawer. And then the fruit and veggies that don't wilt as easily, but still need to be preserved a little bit longer, putting those in the low humidity drawer. And sometimes refrigerators, you can shift the little tab in there, and it can either be a low or high humidity drawer. And sometimes they'll say like fruits and vegetables, and so you can push it towards the fruits, and that'll mean low humidity, or towards the veggies side of it, and that's a higher humidity. And then another tip from their website was that storing certain fruits in their own part of your kitchen if they're just out on your countertop, because they produce that ethylene gas, and that can actually cause other fruits and veggies to go bad quicker. Okay, so switching to reducing food waste, whether you're gardening or if you're going to the farmer's market once a week or during that season. So with gardening, starting small if you've never done it before, or depending on your space, that can be a good way to reduce food waste. If you grow too much and you just can't use it, you might just say, I don't know what to do, and not end up using it. So with that, having a plan. So plan what you'll eat, or plant what you'll eat. That can be important. I know there's some things that just are fun to grow, but maybe you don't like to grow or like to eat them. And then planning your meals around your harvest. If you know that if you grew lettuce, plan to have a couple of salads or something during the week, so you're not just harvesting the food. Looks like there's a question. Oh, that's a good question. I'm not in Salt Lake, so I don't know a list of So the question is if anyone has a list of farmers markets and when they operate in Salt Lake City or Salt Lake County. So kind of planning your shopping around their days of operation. So if anyone has that list, ooh, it looks like Melanie has that list. Great. And I like that tip. Yeah. So shopping around those days of operation and not buying too much. So then you can just go there, because going to farmers markets is more fun than going to the grocery store. Being out, looking at the different produce and all of that. And then another major one for planning is plan to preserve your harvest. And this could be from your garden, or you could buy excess from the farmer's market and preserve it. For me, I like to go and buy corn. I like to buy green beans, and I buy them in excess. And then I like to blanch them and freeze them. So then when I make soups during the winter, rather than having to go back to the store, I can just get them the frozen food, whatever it might be, from my freezer, and then use it in my soups or other meals. And one thing too with that is if you're freezing it, you could write the date of when you froze it, how much is actually in there. So if you're making a recipe and it says 2 cups of corn or something like that, you'll know how much is in the bag. And so then that makes it a little bit easier too. But you can also can your food. USU Extension has a great food preservation website. I can put that in the chat. But if you search USU Extension Preserve the Harvest, we have a lot of recipes that have been tested, are safe for canning. Or you can go to the National Center for Home Food Preservation. They have a lot of safe recipes for canning. Or maybe you have, if you do preserve food, the Ball canning books are great as well. And then lastly, sharing your produce is always great. I know people really appreciate that too. So if you grew too much or have too much, you can always share with your neighbors as well. And then if food does go bad, maybe considering composting. That's not really my area of expertise. Our gardening people, that's more their area, but that's a great thing to do, is take those the food or the scraps that have gone bad and compost it. And if you do garden, you can reuse it for your next year's garden. Okay, so just to finish up, we talked about a lot today, but eating seasonally is really a great thing, and there's a lot of different ways you can do it, whether it's going to a farmer's market, having your own garden, gardening in a community garden even, or even during those winter months as we're missing the fresh food from the farmer's market, finding ways to buy that frozen and canned food so we can really maximize the nutrition we're getting from our food, reducing the food waste and our food costs. And then just trying to have a variety of food throughout in our meals throughout the week and even throughout the different seasons. That really can help with a lot of different things. It has a lot of great benefits, and it helps with just healthy aging in general. And then lastly, we just talked about reducing that food waste overall can help with just having good sustainable habits as well. So, all right, well, that's all I have. I'm happy to answer questions. Or if not, thanks for attending, and hopefully you're able to implement some of these tips and eat seasonally.
So, take a look.
We do have one question from before. It says, what do you recommend for people whose bodies have difficult time processing grains and dairy to get the recommended amounts?
Yes, that's a great question. It can be very specific to depending on the different grains and just kind of what your body is able to tolerate. Since I am a dietitian, my first recommendation would probably just be to meet with a dietitian and get that one-on-one help to see what your body can tolerate, and get that expert direction from them. You can always kind of keep a food log and see what foods you tolerate and which ones you don't tolerate. But getting the nutrients, you might have to take some supplements depending on how much of the different foods you can eat. Yeah, that's a tough one because it's pretty broad, but yeah, so either visiting a dietitian or trying to take some supplements if you're really limited in what you can eat. So yeah, so there's a question in the chat about dairy products. So yogurt, milk, butter, if you should purchase them from local farms. Dairy is a little bit harder, just because when you're buying it from the grocery store, there's the FDA controls food safety issues basically. So pasteurization is a huge deal with certain dairy products. And so there's been a lot of interest in like drinking raw milk, but there's a lot of food safety issues around raw dairy. And so maybe if you're wanting to purchase them from local farms, just talking to them about if they're pasteurizing their food. There's no real nutrient increase from raw dairy products. The pasteurization process is just really heating up the food to kill those unsafe microorganisms that could get you sick. And so, yeah, I would just talk to them if you're concerned about their process, but if they have a process for pasteurizing that so it's safe to eat, I'm all about supporting local farms. So yeah, that's just something to consider when you're working with local farms. So yeah, good question.